support our teams to embed social value outcomes through their projects. Social values are really aligned with our mission as an organisation, and ensuring that long-term sustainability for the communities that we work in. And I think the angle specifically here, in terms of collaborating with SMEs, is so important because SMEs are such an integral part of the industry supply chain and provide that niche expertise in specific locations. So with that support of being deeply embedded in their communities and understanding local needs and priorities, I think often better than larger, more centralised organisations. So I think there's a real opportunity here to maximise social value benefits across the industry by making social value more accessible to SMEs.
Mm-hmm.
No, Kalisha, yes, that's great. And I think that's partly why we're here today, isn't it? To sort of demystify what social value means for SMEs. I think we're now able to record the meeting, Paul. So just to let everyone know that we'll be recording the call today because we've had a number of members who can't make it. So, thank you for agreeing to allow us to record it. Mark, I'm going to turn to yourself next. Could you do the same? Just introduce yourself. And say a little bit about why this is such an important subject.
Thanks, Kate. I'm Mark Bolger. I'm Director of Social Value Consultancy, which was the first consultancy that was developed around social value. I'm a little bit of a dinosaur, came from the public sector in the 90s and then started working with the New Economy in Manchester to develop the unit cost database for the HM Treasury and worked with Social Value UK to develop the Global Value Exchange in terms of a major database of proxy values. So I primarily I'm an economist and focus on the monetisation and non-monetisation of social value. And I've developed a number of tools. So I did develop a social profit calculator, which is Loop, the Rail social value tool, a number of tools for different organisations such as ISG, Galliford Try and so forth, Vinci. And I think really the key thing for me is around it's the accessibility in terms of SMEs and getting supporting them to be able to have a better understanding of what social value is and how they are delivering social value at a local level, what is intrinsic to their organisation and what additional they can do, and being able to evidence that, whether it's through a monetary value or through a non-monetary value, and also coming up with a common set of metrics to help them on that journey.
No, thank you, Mark. And it's obviously great to have someone like yourself in the team helping us develop the guidance. Also, I think all of you have touched on this, that increasingly where you're doing public procurements, that government is asking for evidence of social value. So it does make it feel like this event is very topical, very useful, hopefully, to members. So finally, Bianca, our last panel member, please introduce yourself and say why social value matters.
Hi everyone, I'm Bianca Latini. I'm an associate in the Buro Happold Sustainability and Physics team, and I'm Global Social Impact Lead for the company. And I do a lot of work with the UK GBC and the World GBC, writing best practice guidance around social impact and social value and how to deliver it in different contexts and different scales. In terms of why social value is important, I mean, quite fundamentally, the built environment is the people's environment. It's an environment for people, and I think for way too long we haven't actually considered the impact that our environment actually has on us. And I think this rise in importance in social impact is coming at a good time. I think it's incredibly important, and I'm glad to see that the rigor and information and accountability in it is starting to ramp up compared to like its environmental sustainability counterpart. In terms of for SMEs, I mean, SMEs are like the foundation of our construction industry, and so it's just making it accessible for them, making it easier for them, and making sure that the burden isn't on them of trying to figure it out, I think is absolutely fundamental. Like, I don't think we're doing a good job if an SME fails because they were trying to deliver what we asked them to deliver in the first place. So I think that's really important. But yeah, I think social impact is everything. So measuring it, understanding it, and making sure that we're delivering things for the right people, the people who need it, and I think is really, really important.
No, thank you, Bianca. Couldn't put it better. So now you've all heard a little bit about both the panelists and why social value matters. Next, I'm going to ask Paul to say a little bit about our matchmaking service and how that's going to work. And I'm hoping lots of you today will volunteer to be part of our matchmaking service, either because you're experts and you want to demonstrate social value by sharing your expertise, like some of our panelists here, or because you're an SME and you know it's important and you want to get involved, but you're not sure where to start. You will be exactly the sort of people that we're hoping our matchmaking service will support and help. So yes, Paul, can you just talk us through how we see that working?
Yes, thank you very much, Kate, and to all the panelists, thank you very much for being able to attend this morning. I'll just give you a quick run through. I'll share my screen in a few seconds or so, but I'd just like to give the rationale behind this social value matchmaking service. So last year we had a social value steering group, and we had a number of meetings, both in person and online, to discuss what could be the possible outputs in regards to social value work here at ACE and EIC. And we ultimately it was ultimately decided that two fundamental pieces of work should be conducted, and those were a social value guide, which we have two of the authors, which online today, Kalisha and Mark, which will be published later on in a year, aimed primarily at SMEs, and also the social value matchmaking service. So I think it's best if I just run through and just show some slides. So I'm about just to share my screen, and I think we'll be able to make these slides available after the event. So I'm just about to Kate or someone, if you can just give me a nod just to say that you can see this on your screen.
Yeah, we can see the slides now.
Thank you very much. So this is the same for both ACE and EIC websites. Once you go into the home page, you should see a tab somewhere along the top labeled social value. Click on that and it will take you through to the social value homepage, where we've got the rationale or reasoning behind why we believe it's so important. As you can see, with the sort of tagline, let's unlock the power of value creation together. If you and the matchmaking service, in essence, as Kate has said, we're going to have two groups of people. The first group of people will be those willing volunteers who are going to say, yes, we're very kindly going to be able to answer questions and queries on behalf of an SME. And today being the launch, obviously, we would, once we build up the bank of volunteers, and I would strongly encourage all attendees this afternoon, please share this link to all your colleagues as well, those that couldn't make it, and just sign up. So it's a very, very simple process to do. So once you're on the homepage, if you just scroll down, you will see three boxes, and it's the middle box in terms of wishing to help out or have a query answered that people need to do. So if you have a look at the middle box, you'll see this, but if you wish to opt in, you just scroll down just a tiny bit more and you'll come into the, as you can see, the social value matchmaking service opt-in form. We ask you just to put your name, email address, etc. as general details. Obviously, I need your name, your email address, because the information is going to come to me, and I've got a query from an SME, and in effect, I'm going to marry the two people together, hence the matchmaking service, as it were, and you'll be able to correspond with each other together to be able to answer that question. So there are a number of categories which I won't go through, but you can see it's hopefully quite exhaustive. However, just in case there is something else that's in members could contribute to, we do have at the end other categories. So as from today, a big request to all members to be able to help complete this, pass this on to colleagues. That information will come to me, and then later on down the line, hopefully in a few weeks or so, we'll have a bank of, as I say, of volunteers who'll be able to answer these queries. If you're an SME and you would like a question to be answered, then again, you go to the Social Value homepage, and then you will click on the middle box where it says, click here to submit your social value question. Very simple form, general details. And then, as you can see, you just type in your question, and then I will go and look at this and see, okay, so Kate's SME Limited has a question about, I don't know, Tom's, or, you know, what's a good example of having a social value practice, but I've only got 10 members of staff, say, so I'm limited in terms of times and resources. I will have a look at my opt-in volunteers form and say, okay, then I think Kalisha, I think excellent, we'll be able to put the two people together, send an email to each other, and then you can correspond. And we've all, hopefully, if everything goes well, you can see in the box on the right hand side, offering feedback, so both the opt-in volunteers and the SMEs can be able to provide saying, yes, we've had, you know, guidance, I've been given information, I've been taken down a road that I didn't consider before, but it's been a great service to me. Of course, this is all free. Everyone's volunteering their time. So from all those people who are opted in, the great social value practice, you'll be able to obviously promote this on your own organizational websites as well. And we'd like this thing obviously to blossom and grow, so over the next few weeks, months, and so forth, we'll be able to really build up what I believe will be a sort of a unique social value for a service, and so that people can really benefit both by opting in and answering, and by having queries answered. And very finally, though, I'm not the link won't take me there on the this form here, but we do have some case studies here that members can look at, and a big ask for members, both large and small firms. If you think you've got a great case study regarding social value and you would like to promote this both on our ACE and EIC websites, then please contact me, and I'll be able to talk to our marketing manager, Victoria O'Day, and we'll be able to hopefully put this up and promote this and show good social value practice. So I think, Kate, that in essence is how it will work.
No, fantastic. Thank you, Paul. So, you know, as you can see, it's quite a simple process. You can just either nominate yourself as an expert or fill in the form and ask for help. I can see we've had a question in the chat about who owns the information. It will all be owned by us as ACE and EIC, so we will be, you know, facilitating that. And by signing up, obviously, you allow us to use your data and introduce you to someone to sort of help you with your request, or to share your details in terms of sort of matchmaking service. We had another question about the guide, a really good question. So the guide is under development, and next now we're going to talk a little bit to Mark and Kalisha, who've been helping to write the guide. We hope that will be launched shortly, so I would say in the next few weeks. We're just finalising it. It's at the sort of design and sort of proofing stage, but you know, you should expect to see it relatively soon. So Mark, I thought I might come to you first, and you know, clearly you're a deep expert on this subject. You know, it's great that you've been working on this for many years. Can you say a little bit more about, you know, what do you mean by like monetizing or not monetizing social value benefits?
There are two key elements to social value that have evolved side by side, and one is around the monetization, which is showing evidence in value for money, and a return on investment, particularly for the client in terms of what they're investing in, and getting added social value and understanding monetary value for that, so that enables them to make decisions. But then on the other hand, there's also the hearts and minds in terms of the difference that you actually make. Okay, so SMEs make the difference really, but they find it very difficult to articulate from a monetary perspective what the value of that is. So they might take on apprenticeships, or they might take on new jobs and things like that, but understanding what the value of that is quite difficult for them, and for them to evidence it. So, you know, what happens is the managing contractor. So I'm currently working with the managing contractor on a new hospitals program for a major hospital, and doing the final business case for that, and setting the targets and things like that around local spend and SME spend. And the contract is really good in terms of, you know, providing support internally around enabling them to deliver against apprenticeship targets or employment targets. So it depends, you know, who the contractor is and things like that. But both of them, monetization and non-monetization, go hand in hand. But I think that a lot of SMEs don't understand their impact, and that's really the starting point. So one of the things that I'm currently working on at the moment is developing a tool that's specific for SMEs in terms of the monetization. And one of the biggest barriers that they have is the cost. You know, there's a lot of tools that are out there, and there's been a bit of a smoke and mirrors movement in terms of it's caused a lot of confusion, people's understanding around social value and how it's measured, how a value is put together, and what the actual value should be. So so with all of that confusion that's out there in terms of, you know, social value becoming a market in itself, it's become more confusing. So through the guide, we're going to demystify all of that in terms of, you know, monetization, non-monetization metrics. So a lot of people did a massive tender recently, and there was a lot of confusion from working with some, you know, like the top three consultants around whether you use the TOMS or the social value model. And it was quite clear in the tender document that it was the social value model, and a lot of it was around contract labor force and locals, you know, local people. How do they access those jobs and skills and training opportunities? So we came up with a major package which was around that. So we'll see how that goes. But SMEs are the ones that need a better understanding and the most support around this, and making it more accessible for them.
Oh, thank you, Mark. And Kalisha, it'd be great if you could build on that. I know, you know, in the guide when we publish it, there'll be information about definitions, you know, because the risk is there's lots of jargon here, isn't there, or lots of tools. Do you want to say a little bit more about, you know, how we can demystify social value?
Yeah, I think Mark, you put that really well, because there's the danger that these social value requirements can then be seen as a bit red tape or additional barrier. And I think the language and the jargon, because it's quite abstract and there aren't, you know, there's no legal standard definition, that can then cause confusion or overcomplication. And like it's been touched on, I think then SMEs, you know, they may already be delivering social value, but they don't recognize that it is social value. You know, simple things like employing local people or using local suppliers, carrying out school visits, things like that. So the purpose really was to make that a bit more accessible and give a bit of a background into the social value policy landscape, but specifically offer a better understanding of some of those definitions, terms like input, output, outcomes, key concepts such as additionality, I think, and also how social value relates to UN SDGs, ESGs, and CSR, because there is just a lot of concepts and jargon out there that can then be quite challenging. So we've tried to make that as simple as possible. And I think another angle that's really important as well is that this is written by ACE members, and therefore it hopefully responds to the needs of consultants. I think we find that a lot of the policy out there is possibly more directed towards contractors in the space. So trying to have a lens from a consultant perspective is also really, really helpful.
No, thank you, Kalisha. And I think that's a really important point, isn't it? That as consultants, often we're in at the very beginning, at the design phase of a project, or we might have oversight, at different phases of a project, but we're not the contractor, so our perspective is different and actually has that strategic overview. So maybe it's more important than ever that we can help with this stuff. So Bianca, I'm going to turn to you. So Kalisha referenced things like the UN sustainability goals. And you talked about working on global projects. It struck me recently, because obviously we're in the build up to the election, it's quite an exciting time, isn't it, that I hear lots of the political parties talking about the importance of getting planning decisions, say, and the importance of communities actually welcoming projects, that often we feel like we're doing something really important, which could be an energy project, or it could be a housing, sort of a housing, retrofitting a building and converting into flats, or creating a housing estate or something. How do you see this social value question on that global stage? What does it mean for people outside the UK, and why is it important for us that we benefit from that global expertise?
Oof, that is a multifaceted big question. I mean, so the work that I did on like global policy with the World GBC was kind of, it speaks to exactly what you're trying to do here. It was a recognition that there isn't a global understanding of definitions, and they're quite high, like the UK GBC one. It's quite high level document. It just seeks to explain, right, what are the different ways in which we impact the environment, the built environment. What can we do at design stage? What can we do at construction phase? What does it mean for supply chains? What is the intersection with environmental sustainability? Like I mentioned it before, but like when we talk about environmental sustainability, it's our environment too. And so there's a lot of intersections between environmental and social sustainability. So for example, I was working on a project doing the retrofit and decarbonization plan for all the community housing, social housing in New South Wales in Australia, for example. And all of that is about, okay, fine, we have net zero carbon targets, and all our politicians and governments have, and lots of councils have net zero carbon commitments. What does that mean when we're talking about disadvantaged groups or people living in social housing? How does the equity piece actually intersect with the environmental piece? And actually, and I found this also with a lot of work that I do with like C40 cities for governments like in Barcelona, Warsaw, Washington, DC, what have it, is that for a lot of groups, it's about it's an equity thing. They need to be able to consume more. They need to be able to have more access to resources. They need to have better health outcomes. And actually, they need to be able to consume a little more when you retrofit those houses. And so, yeah, I think there's a big intersection also with the retrofit movement. I've been working with the UK GBC on their national housing retrofit calculator, the Upgrading Britain's Homes. I don't know if and we've been to Parliament with it and everything. And I think there's a recognition that there's a big social impact piece there as well in terms of upskilling to deliver national scale retrofit, what the impacts on communities are going to be, what that ownership is going to be like. I think anywhere in the world, a lot of delivering social impact is going to come from stewardship. It's going to come from long-term accountability, financing, governance, and I think politics, whatever scale that looks at, is going to play an important role. In the US, you have Justice 40, and that's like that 40% of the value of projects is going to have to be reinvested in disadvantaged communities. What does that mean? Like, it's like a one-page website that is like, okay, but what does that look like in practice? Who are the groups? Wherever you look, you have to identify who it is that are the beneficiaries of the project, and then protect that at all costs and make sure that they're people that are stewards of making sure that the beneficiaries get the outcomes that you're trying to deliver. And I think that's a universal thing. yeah, hopefully that answered that.
Thank you. Thank
question.
you. Really, yeah, quite. And I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier, that, you know, all the projects that we work on are for people, aren't they? And they're for communities. So actually social value is at the heart of that, isn't it? It's saying, like, when we're doing our projects, how can we make sure that we're maximizing that social value that we bring? We're going to throw this open to questions. So if people want to put their hands up, that's probably the easiest, and then I can bring you in. But before I do that, while you think about your questions, I'm going to ask Piers just to bring us back to SMEs. You know, can you say a little bit? You know, I'm conscious your company is an SME, and you're chair of our SME group. What difference is this going to make for SMEs? Do you think? You know, both our guide and our matchmaking. You know, what do you think success looks like for this initiative?
I think probably start with reflecting on what SMEs are, or 80% of the ACE, greater than 80% of the ACE membership, and I would think EIC membership too, are SMEs. So that's organisations ranging between 0 and 250 people. So if you're dealing with businesses that are 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, the resources available to those organisations are not the same as larger businesses. I think that is absolutely an issue. I think the familiarity with the social value landscape, the language, some of our co-panelists have talked about the sort of different language that's used, and the confusing nature of that language, particularly in an environment that you're not that familiar with it. Maybe your client base is not public sector orientated, I don't know. But so coming back to your broader question in terms of what does success look like, I think success is around education and resources and sharing knowledge. I can imagine something like the matchmaking service being incredibly valuable. You know, as an SME, that sort of phone a friend ability to someone with deep knowledge in that particular area, that could be hugely valuable. And, you know, having a guide that is written specifically for SMEs that allows you to appreciate this, so the social value landscape, I can imagine it being really valuable, Kate.
No, and I think you're right. It can be quite, you know, it should be quite a practical thing, shouldn't it? I think
Yeah.
I'm not can't see anyone with their hand up at the moment, so I'm going to keep chatting to the panel, and, you know, but obviously if this session is interactive, we're more likely to answer your questions. So don't be shy. Do feel like you can put your hand up, or if you want to put questions in the chat, I mean, that would be fine too. So maybe let's come to some practical examples. I might ask each of you, you know, what's the social value? What's the project where you delivered social value that you're most proud of? You know, where you really made a difference. So who shall I come to first? Who wants to volunteer to talk about a project that they were proud of?
I'm happy to go first, Kate, and
you,
sort
Piers.
of no problem, and more generally, because I think I can probably link it back to some of the comments that Bianca was making around stewardship and governance. So speaking as Burroughs, so as an SME, where do we think we've delivered most value? It comes from us as an organisation. So the drive to deliver social value is from within Burroughs. We want to give back to local communities. That might be through lots of means. It might be through apprenticeships. So we've trained staff members at BTEC levels, HND, degree, and even master's levels. So committing to that development of an educational base, that's hugely valuable. We do a lot of work with local universities, local schools around STEM work. So again, giving back to those educational institutions, contributing to charities. We've take the soapbox moment to name drop a local charity that's close to our heart, Big Moose, and they champion mental health awareness, and we've raised over £10,000 for that organisation, but it's all driven from our own desire to contribute social value. What we don't see so much of, or probably poorly directed, is clients necessarily leading where social value effort is best targeted. And I think that does come back to the what Bianca was saying around stewardship and governance. So there will be individuals within client organizations who know where social value should be best targeted within their areas. We're not seeing that often. I think that's an opportunity missed. And what we're also not seeing that often is the kind of measuring and checking up on us. You know, are we doing what we're saying we set out to do? And I don't think we see that regularly enough. And more often we see barriers where you know, where organisations aren't set up to actually receive maybe the input that we're trying to give. So I don't know if the audience and panelists found that helpful, but that's certainly our experience.
No, thank you, Piers, and it's good to have that honesty there of how you're seeing that this is quite new for clients, I think, in some ways. Kalisha, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of agree with that perspective in terms of the consistency or lack of consistency, should I say, in different levels of client maturity. We've seen that as well, and sometimes that means that we get asked questions or asked to deliver commitments that maybe aren't suitable for the services that are being procured. For example, we've seen, you know, being asked to reduce site waste or emissions from plant when we're undertaking an early stage REBA 2 study, for example, and that's just because the clients aren't mature enough or asking the right questions. And actually, that's a bigger picture. What I think would be great from this matchmaking service and guide is actually that influence that we could then have once we become a more mature and cohesive group, provide that feedback back to clients, and even, you know, bigger picture, that sort of policy influence and advocacy, where we'd be able to help shape future regulations and policy in a, you know, ever evolving space.
That's a really great point, Kalisha. And Mark, you were wanting to add to that. Oh, I think you might be on mute, Mark.
Yeah, the confusion in terms of, you know, what social value is, how it's monetized and things like that. If you look at the journey of where social values come from, going back to the modernisation of Local Government Act in 2000, and then with the recession in 2007, 2008, a lot of companies were reporting on their CSR activities, corporate social responsibility, and then this new legislation comes to them in terms of Public Services and Social Value Act, but it's not mandatory. You know, it's just a consideration in the procurement process. And then we've been on a bit of a gap of a journey where the ESGs were introduced in 2015, and so people didn't know whether they should be focusing on social value, environmental sustainability, you know, the ESGs and things like that. And then with the reviews of the Public Services and Social Value Act, there was then PPN 0620, which was the social value model, which made it mandatory to include at minimum 10% weighting in central government contracts. Well, what's been happening at a local level, social value has been adopted at more at a local level than it had been at a central government level. But now you're seeing that it's more central government contracts are embedding it, but they don't really understand it. So they're just a really big tender that I was working on recently had just pulled out the information from the social value model, but not really understood what it was what they were asking. So there were inconsistencies. There's also inconsistencies in tools. They're set up to actually, you've got a set of KPIs, and it doesn't necessarily, not everything fits in the same box. You know, it's like square into a circle type thing. It not all necessarily fits all of the time, so it causes a bit of confusion. So understanding what the local needs are in a particular area is key and really important, so that you know what you can actually deliver, and also not extending out beyond your capabilities. So if you're a professional services or architects, do some pro bono work or something like that, or go to a local school and teach about your profession, and maybe that's the sort of things that you should be doing, rather than going out feeding the homeless or things like that. But using your own skills and expanding that more. I think what we're seeing is a better understanding now of social value since PPN 0620. Also a better understanding of the commitment towards carbon reduction, PPN 0621. And also as we've got the procurement bill and moved away from the meat process, and that's the most advantageous tender, it's really going in the right direction. And I think that, over the next up to 2030, the value of SMEs is actually becoming more and more important, not only just in the construction process, but also in the facilities management, in terms of the, ensuring that services are provided. So look at that legacy element, looking at the whole life value of a particular project, which is one of the things that we developed a methodology for. So I think that it just needs to be simple, for SMEs, simple definition. It's about themselves as an organization and how they see it. And if they're committed to monetization, make sure it fits to their organization, to what they deliver. And if they want to express it in non-monetization, case studies or output numbers, that's fine. It's still the same. They are delivering outcomes. One of the biggest things that's missing from probably the tools and the monetization is the traditional social value methodologies. And that's why a lot of the tools find it hard to be accredited by Social Value UK and Social Value International, because they're not following the methodologies and the cost benefit analysis, and they make reference to it, and then they repurpose the methodologies to make it so that they can sell it. And I think that there's a problem, because it does put SMEs out of the market because it's so costly for them, into enabling them to actually respond to the tender. And also the managing contractors usually make these commitments and put it on the SMEs and say, you've got to deliver that. And it's like, how do we deliver that? So they need more support around social value delivery plans, and then, I'm working on one at the moment, which is a really good one for the new hospitals program. I'm working, with the contractor and working in partnership with them about penalties. Which ones are you going to struggle with? We've put together a social value delivery plan, and within that there are targets around local spend and local SMEs spend, and it's working with them. And we've had to redefine local to sub-regional area, because it's part of its MMC, bottom mass construction and things like that. So you have to work with the contractor, and then it makes it easier for the contractor to engage with the SMEs on the work packages, in terms of the what commitments could you deliver out of this overall contract.
Thank you, Mark. And conscious there, because you referenced PPN notices and various things coming out of the Cabinet Office. So I'm sure lots of members are familiar with that, but just a reminder that the Cabinet Office and government are responsible for commercial policy across government. So they've led on things like the Procurement Act, and these PPN notices are basically notices for the big clients, so whether any client in government is supposed to comply with them. And often this is where the sort of mandating of social value or carbon plans and etc. comes from. And that's why it's more important than ever that, you know, when you're bidding, you know, you might be asked to demonstrate social value, which I suppose comes back to that point, doesn't it? That it needs to be simple, doesn't it? It needs to be something that we can genuinely deliver on and add value. And you had some great examples there, Mark. Now I've got a couple of questions. So I've got Bianca first, and then I've got a question in the chat as well. So I'll come to that next. So Bianca.
I just quickly wanted to echo kind of what Mark and yourself have just mentioned in terms of delivering things that you know you have agency to deliver. I think because of the history of social value in this country, it can be a tick box marking exercise, and it's just like, oh, what's the thing that produces the highest number of monetized social value? And it's really not about that. It's about, okay, what am I good at? First of all, like I understand the importance of understanding the baseline and additionality. That's important. Like you do want to do something that's beyond what you do every day, because then it's additional. But I think we don't need to veer far from like what we're good at. And I think it's really important that that SMEs or anyone in the supply chain or anyone on a project really thinks about what it is what the value is that they do bring to a project. What do they have agency over? Yeah, I think that's, and I think people contractors, consultants, clients at the top of the supply chain, food chain, I think I'm going to say we because we're quite a big consultancy, have a responsibility to understand what role each of these players can provide to a project. I think understanding the big picture and understanding how everyone fits into each other. It's an ecosystem of delivering the built environment, and understanding what the best value that someone can bring to a project, I think is fundamental. And I think that there needs to be there needs to be an understanding from the big players as well of what role different kinds of SMEs, because you know SMEs come in all color, shapes and sizes, so what role they can actually have and what value they can bring, I think is really quite fundamental.
Okay, thank you, Bianca. And that reminds me actually of on High Speed 2, I was familiar with some of the social value work they were doing, and you know it was great. You know, one of the really good examples that I liked was they were actually doing building work in the local communities that they were passing through. So there was a team of you know, across different parts of the, you know, the consultants and the SMEs and the big companies working on High Speed 2, and they were helping to build community gardens or helping to fix things in the local villages and communities. And it just felt really it really resonated, because of course, you know, people building High Speed 2, you're a builder, aren't you? So you go out and you do a small local building project for free. I thought it was a really good example. So Kalisha, before I come to you, I'm just going to read the question in the chat. So how do we think social value expectations will evolve in public sector projects over the medium term? You know, it's clear that, you know, I think Mark, you said it started quite at the local government level and now it's more comprehensive. So how do we think it will evolve? And what sort of expectations do we think? You know, how do we think community expectations and general expectations might change? So Kalisha, shall I take you first on that question? And then if you wanted to add, you know, your observation as well.
Yeah, I'll just touch on my observation before on the last point around offering skills and expertise. I just wanted to raise that's something that we do at Ramboll. So aside from the typical sort of CSR volunteer days, we adopt a model where effectively we provide pro bono services in that manner, and that way we can maximize the benefits and social impact by offering our expertise and skills in that way, and then tailor that to the projects as they come in. So I think, yeah, the traditional CSR volunteer days, although there's value in that, there's less long-term impact associated with that as well. And your question around how it's likely to evolve, so I guess we're expecting the Procurement Act 2023 arrival later this year. But I think the requirements are only going to grow. There's going to be definitely, hopefully, more maturity from clients as we develop, and therefore stronger pressure from clients as well to deliver on what we commit to. I think it was mentioned before that at the moment, sometimes clients don't follow up, or they don't, provide the opportunities to deliver what is being committed at times. But I think, in time, there might be financial penalties involved if you don't commit to what you're deliver to what you're committing to. So yeah, I think a stronger pressure and possibly even higher weighting. At the moment, 10% weighting is relatively standard, but we've seen greater proportion of marks associated with social value already creeping in.
No, thank you, Kalisha. Yeah, so Mark, did you want to come on that too?
Yeah. So I mean, I've seen it up to 40% in terms of the weighting. So it has gone up at a local level. In Ireland, I think they're introducing 20% in their next PPN, and Wales are looking at a different way of actually delivering social value after adopting the TOMs. So they're doing a lot of research in terms of how they change that and more aligned to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. But I'm working with a number of public sector clients in London, and they're looking at developing bespoke things for themselves, so bespoke tools that they can open out to the SMEs, and I've give them access to it so that they can to help them monetize it and evidence the value for money that they create. And I think what you're going to see is a better understanding, maturity at a public. It's always driven from the public sector, local authority level, and then it gets adopted at a government level. But I think you're going to see a lot more maturity at both levels, and I think there's going to be a lot more support that's going to be provided around that, and also a focus on the legacy aspects of any particular investment. So what's the long-term impacts? So I'm working on a hospital at the moment, so what's the impacts on quality adjusted life years, well-being years, in terms of and also how can you maybe the managing contractor work with local organisations around the facilities management, which is where to get the contracts there around catering or cleaning and things like that, looking at the long-term value that when the assets have been built. So there's more focus on a whole life value perspective, just like whole life carbon and things like that. What's the whole life social value over a 25, 30, 40? In the NHS, it's 60-year period that we look at in the business case appraisal, and it's having strategies to do that. And also, when one of their key drivers is, well, if the contractor can't take on apprentices, why don't we take them on as part of the estate management services and the FM contracts? So that's the things that they're looking at, and they're getting a bit more brave in terms of how they're actually approaching it. So I think the knowledge is getting better, and I think that because there will be a skills gap, definitely within the built environment, and it's really focusing on that. I worked with one of the academies in London looking at the future skills that was around the retail industry, and they've seen a big gap, and there's going to be a big gap in the construction industry infrastructure, because we're going to keep changing the way that we build. So there'll be a change in looking at the perspective of local and social value. Yeah, it is important, but if you're delivering a project through MMC, can you deal with social problems, by having a factory in an area of high levels of deprivation, and dealing with a social problem there, while the construction process is taking place. So there's lots of different thoughts, but I think I think in the next few years you'll see more and more from central and local government in terms of being mature around social value, but definitely the weighting will go up, and maybe another guidance issued around the social value model, and maybe monetized as well. So it's one framework that's being used.
No, thank you, Mark. And Bianca, before I come to you, I'm going to ask, we've got a question in the chat, and I think it's probably one that you would be good at responding to. So it's a question about stewardship. How important might it be to identify and engage with those organisations whose fundamental purpose is stewardship, say of land and natural resources? Or the welfare of people. These bodies are very likely to be employers of SME consultants. So what does that stewardship concept look like, where you've got those sort of stewards of welfare or stewards of land and nature?
So I was raising my hand to kind of speak to both of those questions, because I think they are quite linked. Because I think, so last week I was at UK Reef, and I went to a lot of panels where it was like local councils and local boroughs and their experience of delivering social impact and social value on projects. And I think, and speaking to also what Mark mentioned, I think the long-term stewardship and outcomes of the project is increasingly becoming important. I think historically we've focused so much on like that early stage monetization of like what we think we're going to deliver, and there hasn't been that accountability. And I've found there's quite a lot of developers and councils that are like, okay, the number is nice to like understand the scale of impact to some extent, but what does it actually mean for the people in my borough? What does it actually mean for people in my council? What are the outcomes? What does it mean for poverty levels or fuel poverty? Or what does it mean for the sense of community or community cohesion? What does that number actually represent? And lots of people are, starting to look past the numbers and look at things more like the stewardship models and like who actually has ownership over things. So there's the UCL Citizen Science Academy, and they're creating citizen scientists so that you actually have people embedded in the community with the ability to monitor the social impact of a project. I suppose in terms of the land and nature, I mean, so that's quite fundamental on any project with any public realm. And those are the kinds of projects that you can really have social impact on, because you're talking about bringing people together, creating placemaking, creating places that people can mingle. One of the most important things for human health is human connection, and we fundamentally shape how that looks like with our urban environment in a lot of ways, and what we provide and where we provide it, and how safe it is at night, and whether someone can feel like they go to somewhere or feel like they belong to a specific community. And I think stewardship of land and nature in the public realm, I mean, there's always a form of stewardship when it comes to green infrastructure. But I think we're adding a layer to it in the understanding of how it intersects with the social sphere. And I think that those people exist already. And I think we're kind of just adding to the beauty of what their role is in their stewardship of that part of the built environment. Yeah.
Thank you, Bianca. I'm conscious we've just got 2 minutes left. I'm just going to say thank you to Paul and the team for pulling this work stream together. Thank you to all of our panelists today, and particularly maybe to Mark and Kalisha, because I know you've been active in writing the guide that we hope to publish soon. This feels like just the beginning of a really important initiative and a really important conversation. So please do volunteer to be part of our matchmaking service, and we will obviously promote the guide widely when it starts. In our Environmental Industries Commission recently, we were talking about the fact that there's sort of one crisis, that people tend to think of carbon and climate over here and nature over there, and social value as a separate work stream. But I think, as we've touched on today, they're all part of the same thing, aren't they? And they're all benefits that we can bring through the projects that we work on. So thank you to all of you for giving up your time today. I'm conscious we've had over 60 people on the call, which is fantastic. It's great to see that that everyone recognises what an important subject it is. We love your feedback, so obviously, give us any feedback, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all maybe in person soon. Thank you.
Thank you.